As patients escape quarantine, doctors struggle to contain the latest Ebola outbreak in the DRC. As the U.S. celebrates Memorial Day, thousands of flags honor the fallen at Arlington National Cemetery. And Senegal's Art Biennale takes contemporary art to the people. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gitu in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We begin tonight with health workers in the Democratic Republic of Congo who have been reaching communities affected by Ebola in the Equator province, rolling out an experimental vaccine and raising awareness about the virus that has already killed more than 22 people and infected 30 more. With more than twice as many Ebola outbreaks as any other country since the virus was discovered in 1976, Congolese are familiar with its destructive power, yet fear and suspicion of medical authorities are still hindering efforts to contain its spread. Congo's government, the World Health Organization, and other aid agencies, including UNICEF, are racing to contain what could be the most dangerous of Congo's 9 epidemics since the virus was discovered. UNICEF says its goal is to successfully mobilize the population for vaccination. Meanwhile, medical professionals in Congo are racing to contain the rapid spread of the deadly Ebola virus after 3 infected patients escaped from a hospital where they were receiving treatment. Here's a Reuters report.
The patients had been in an isolation ward in the city of Mbandaka, but fled on motorcycles after relatives came to collect them. One went straight to church, while another went home. They both died the following day. Reuters' Aaron Ross is in Dakar.
This is extremely concerning, especially because the fact that they died so shortly thereafter means that they were extremely contagious to those around them. And so, health workers worked very quickly to identify all the contacts, the people they came into contact with, to vaccinate some of those people and further trace any additional contacts that may have taken place.
Congo is a very religious country where people can have more trust in their spiritual leaders than in medical staff.
And many people attribute what's happening to witchcraft or sorcery rather than the scientific explanations that medical staff are trying to get across to them. And so a lot of people, whether to receive spiritual counseling or just to be at home and not find themselves in this often dehumanizing and lonely isolation, they do think about leaving the hospital.
Health officials are particularly concerned by the disease's presence in Mbandaka, a crowded trading hub upstream of Kinshasa that's home to around 10 million people. They've set up this Ebola awareness community group to educate locals about how the disease is transmitted. But staff say there's not a lot they can do to prevent patients from leaving hospitals.
To South Sudan now, where the UN peacekeeping mission is warning of surging violence in parts of the country, putting thousands of war-weary civilians at risk and endangering the fragile peace process in the world's youngest nation. Intense fighting has been reported in Niadiu, Mayendit, Rupchai, Thaka and Merinyal in the vicinity of Lia and Bintio in the Unity region, as well as around Mutot and Akobo in Jonglei. Thousands of civilians have been forced to flee to the bush in opposition-held areas to escape the violence. Tom Taisi is the Relief, Reintegration and Protection Officer for the UN mission in South Sudan.
Currently, there is a move by both the humanitarian and UNMIST to scale up the support to the population in form of humanitarian assistance for those displaced in communities, as well as those who are here at the TPA. On the other hand, UNMIST is also increasing visibility to patrol in areas which we assess as vulnerable.
On Sunday, the United States announced that it has proposed that the UN Security Council impose sanctions against several South Sudanese ministers and officials, accusing them of obstructing peace efforts and blocking humanitarian assistance to civilians. Now, Kenya's media is vibrant and freer compared to other African countries, thanks to the constitution that includes protections for freedom of expression and the press. However, negative coverage is prompting some officials to go after their critics. And joining me in the studio to discuss Kenya's media's environment is VOA's Nairobi Bureau Chief, Daniel Schaff. Daniel, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther. Good to be here.
Now, from Moscow to Nairobi, how is the media environment in Kenya?
Well, there's certainly been some concerns recently in Kenya leading up to the elections and with the so-called swearing in of the opposition leader Raila Odinga, when we saw the authorities shut down temporarily a few of the major broadcasters for covering the so-called swearing-in ceremony. That raised a lot of alarm bells, and there have been some concerns that this is not the only step being taken towards some of the media. But it's not just in Kenya. That we're also seeing throughout the region. There's been a squeezing on the media, not just from some of the countries that we have seen it from for years, such as Ethiopia and Eritrea, Burundi and Rwanda. We're also seeing it in Tanzania, Kenya's neighbor. So there's a lot of concern that there has been a stepping back in media freedoms, and it's up to journalists and the communities to speak out and to ensure that this does not become a permanent situation or an ongoing negative trend.
You know, Daniel, you previously reported for VOA from Moscow, and I'm just wondering how the two worlds compare, because, you know, what you just said about Kenya, Tanzania, neighboring countries, Burundi, I mean, nothing seems to really be, you know, very, very good for the media right now, especially when you look at Kenya's political heat that just passed with the presidential elections. Seemingly this is now kind of past, and Odinga is kind of spearheading some peace efforts. How does actually that augur for Kenya's political climate right now?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting change of events in Kenya. There were, of course, a lot of tensions and a lot of concerns that things were going to get worse. And then we saw with the handshake between these two leaders, the president and the opposition, that there could be a way forward. And now he's been appointed as this peace envoy and taking a trip to South Sudan. Very interesting role for him. And it's, of course, been controversial among his own supporters. Some very outspoken opponents saying that he's sold out the opposition. Others who are welcoming it and saying, okay, this is a way forward. So we'll see. We just have to keep watching and seeing how it'll develop. But of course, you know, any kind of discussion and cooperation is a good thing compared to any sort of clashes that we might see on the streets, which is, of course, what everyone was fearing.
Now, I know you're in Nairobi, but you have plans to move around the region and look at issues there. What are the major issues we will be looking forward to in terms of news coverage in the coming months in the region?
Well, it's such a diverse region, and also Nairobi is going to be taking on some of the coverage coordination duties for Africa as a whole. So we're talking about 54, as you know. So it's many different cultures, it's many different issues. But we're hoping to concentrate on not just some of the major topics, but also some very interesting profiles of individuals, and not concentrating just on the problems that, of course, the continent is facing, but also looking at some of the innovators, the individuals who are taking steps to move their country, to move their communities in new and exciting directions. So it's a very wonderful challenge that I'm looking forward to.
I love that, you know, positive stories about the African continent, because what we see mainly from the Western media is usually very negative. Daniel Schaff, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Daniel Schaff is a VOA Nairobi Bureau Chief. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo outlined the Trump administration's efforts to end Iran's nuclear program in an exclusive interview with VOA's Persian service, as VOA's Julie Tabo reports. Thursday's conversation also covered recent protests in Iran and the administration's efforts to free Americans detained in Iran.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tells VOA's Setare Derakhshesh Iran is a crucial nation.
It's something that the president has viewed as a serious threat to Middle East stability and therefore to American national security. He also looks at the place that the Iranian people find themselves, and he thinks it's a place America can help make a difference.
The proposed new security framework, Pompeo says, covers important issues left out of the initial agreement.
The first agreement was very narrow. It was an effort to say that the Iranian regime was spending a ton of money on its nuclear program and wanted to halt that. A noble objective, a good goal, a worthy one. But the threat that Iran presents is so much greater than that. Right? They're taking, they're launching missiles into Muslim countries. They are, they're taking the human rights away from their people.
The Trump administration is not pushing for regime change in Iran, says Pompeo, and it supports the efforts of opposition groups outside the country.
So long as they're working towards the same thing, we don't want them advocating for regime change either. We want them working on behalf of the Iranian people, ordinary Iranian citizens who want nothing more than to live their lives.
Pompeo says his team is working every day to free all Americans currently detained in Iran, and believes Iranians deserve the truth about widespread corruption in their country.
You have senior leaders that are pocketing money, using businesses that are nominally fronts, and frankly just stealing. To the extent we can prove that and demonstrate that, I'd welcome the chance to expose it so the Iranian people can judge for themselves whether these are the individuals they want to lead their country.
On Thursday, Pompeo told his Senate committee the administration is well along with plans to impose old sanctions and add new ones against Iran, to deny Iran the wealth to do bad stuff. Earlier this week, the top U.S. diplomat told a House committee that Washington plans meetings with allies soon to discuss the next steps in dealing with Iran's nuclear program. Julie Tabo, VOA News, Washington.
Wala Blege is an American of Liberian and Nigerian descent and professor at the American University. She is also an advocate for civil, women's, and workers' rights and legal counsel for the Washington, D.C. Nurses Association. In addition, she hosts a TV program offering free legal advice to local citizens in the state of Maryland and its suburbs, where she is now running for the Maryland House of Delegates. Wala joins me in the studio to tell us more about her political candidature. Welcome to Africa 54, Wala.
Thank you for having me.
You know you're running on a Democratic Party ticket, and is this your first time?
Yes, this is officially my first time running. I did run for smaller positions within the Democratic Party before, but to represent the Prince George's County residents, this is my first time.
Now, this is a big undertaking for somebody whose father came from, is it Liberia?
Yes, my grandfather was a farmer that could not speak English in Liberia. And my dad cried a couple weeks ago because he says, my grandfather would have never guessed that we would be here in this position.
So what are the issues you're looking at? Because we've seen political campaigns, you know, here in the U.S., in Africa. What are the issues?
The biggest issue, we have knocked on doors throughout the district. The biggest issue is education. We have a high African population within Prince George's County, especially in my district. And a lot of people feel that they've moved to the suburbs for better opportunity and education, and then they have to pay for private school because they can't send their kids to the local schools because of the many problems.
Now, when you look at campaigns, whether it's here or the U.S., and especially when you were born here.
Yes, I was.
But you've traversed between, you know, here and Africa, and you see how elections are. In fact, Liberia produced the first female African president. And when you compare the campaigns, what do you see as the major differences in terms of how we do campaigns back in the continent and how you do it here?
Well, one of the main things is actually where the money comes from. You know, in the United States, the money can come from the people. That's actually the type of campaign we're running. You know, a couple years ago, I was big with the Bernie Sanders campaign, and Bernie Sanders campaign was a $27 campaign where average person gave $20. That's the same campaign we're running. The average individual has given about $30. And that's the campaign. We've raised close to $100,000 on that. And, you know, in Liberia, I know for sure because, you know, I've had many in my family active with the local elections with President Weah. And one of the things we have is that, you know, the payment comes from different places. In fact, it doesn't come from the people at all. And the people, especially in Liberia, are very frustrated because they are not getting what they need to get from their government because they're not paying for it.
Well, since we're kind of running out of time, let's look at what your goal is. If you do win, you know, in this election, Do you see yourself seeking a higher political office in the U.S.?
I do. I plan to go as far as I can. For Africans, we have many Africans in Prince George's County in my district, and one of the things that I want to focus on is making sure Africa has a voice. Right now, when you go into the circles, in the political circles, when they talk about immigration, when they talk about reaching out to communities in need, Africans are never in the room. Never at the table. We're throwing money away. And that's what I told people, because everyone comes to America saying, I'm only going to be here for a short time and I'll return home. But then 40, 50 years later, they're still there. Their grandkids have grown up there. Their kids have grown up there, and they're having their own kids. But yet and still we have no voice.
Make it home. Make it home and have a voice, right?
Right.
Make it home and have a voice. So looking at parenting, what are the issues? Parenting, the youth, you know, there are all these challenges we see around, and it's everywhere, whether it's Africa or here. How are you tackling that?
We're looking at apprenticeship programs. That's a big thing. I was appointed to the governor's task force on apprenticeship, and what we found was that in countries like Europe, they have robust apprenticeship programs where from a young age, kids start working in places to get on the hands-on experience, especially when it comes to IT. Those are the biggest job creators, and frankly, that's why a lot of companies have to go afar to other countries to get people, because our folks in the United States are not trained. So it's time to actually start training them at the young age so they can start working early.
And what you say here works too for Africa, right?
Yes.
Wala, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Wala Bligay is a Democratic candidate for the Maryland State House of Delegates. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, in Senegal, bringing art to the people. Stay with us.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, health workers have been rolling out an experimental vaccine and raising awareness about the Ebola virus that has already killed at least 22 people and infected 30 more. In South Sudan, thousands of people have fled to the swamp and bush in opposition-held areas of the unity state of the country to escape fighting that has flared up across the region. In Italy, a baby boy named Miracle was born on board a humanitarian ship on Saturday, a bright spot as the tide of migrants risking sea crossing from Libya to Italy increases as the weather improves. An Malian migrant who saved a 40-year-old child hanging from a fourth-floor Paris balcony is honored by French President Emmanuel Macron and offered French citizenship.
Welcome back to Africa 54. It's a big day here in the United States. It's Memorial Day, where thousands of flags wave proudly this weekend at tombstones in Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, just outside Washington. For over 60 years, the Army's ceremonial unit known as the Old Guard has been placing the flags at grave sites in the huge military cemetery in preparation for Memorial Day, the national holiday observed on the last Monday in the month of May. It honors the men and women who died while serving in the military. VOA's Deborah Block takes us to the annual tradition known as Flags In.
Soldiers walk across Arlington National Cemetery to place flags in front of more than 230,000 tombstones. The flags honor the members of the armed forces who are buried here, many who gave their lives to defend their country. Here lies a 21-year-old soldier killed during the war in Iraq in 2011. His younger brother wanted to come here to deliver the flag himself.
I love you, and I'm sorry. And I miss you every day. And I hope I made you proud.
The cemetery is adjacent to an Army base, also the home of the Old Guard, the Army's 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment. This means these soldiers can visit the grave sites of friends, family, and fellow soldiers they once served with.
I do visit them more than just on today. Like every couple of weeks, I'll come out and have a chat during lunch.
Boot by boot, and with great care, the soldiers place a flag to honor a fallen comrade. For this soldier, it is a moving moment to be part of Flags In for the first time.
To just see how many people lost their lives and to be able to put a flag on their tombstones, it means a lot to me.
U.S. Vice President Mike Pence also came to show his respect. And as the commander of the Old Guard quietly inserts flags on each grave, he tells us every soldier is significant.
We're all soldiers, and it's our ability to honor those that have gone before us. And to be able to do this for those families that can't be here is really important.
The flags stand in honor of these fallen soldiers, a tribute to their sacrifice. Deborah Block, VOA News, Arlington Cemetery.
Now, retired U.S. Sergeant Ekabene Bangura came to the United States in 1989 from Sierra Leone and joined the U.S. Army in 1993. He was a reservist assigned to Fort Belvoir in the state of Virginia and joined active duty in 1995. He was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. Sergeant Bangura also served in the multinational force and observers in Sinai, Egypt from 1997 to 1998. He joins me here in the studio to discuss U.S. Memorial Day celebrations. Sergeant Bangura, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
To start with, what does this day mean to you?
It evokes a lot of emotions because there are a lot of people that have given the ultimate sacrifice for me to be able to be here today, for me to be able to come to the U.S. and enjoy everything that I'm enjoying today, even before I joined the military. So, and then having come and then join the military as well makes it even more special that, you know, there are a lot of people that gave up their lives for me to be able to be here.
You came to the U.S. when you were in your teens and decided you wanted to join the military right after high school. You
Yes.
know, what happened? What made you feel that that was the career that you wanted to do?
Initially, to be honest, I joined the military because I needed money for school. But once I once I enlisted, which is the correct word to use, once I enlisted, it became obvious to me that's something that I wanted to continue doing. So I kept re-enlisting and continued to serve because I just felt like, you know, there was a higher calling for me to do something else other than what I initially wanted to do, which was just to get money for college.
I don't know if it's just me, but when I came to the U.S. and I see how Americans are patriotic about, you know, this country and about the men and women who serve in the military or even the police force, you know, I just wondered, where do we compare when we look back in our native countries? If you, in the case of Sierra Leone, what do you see?
The one thing that, you know, I can always draw upon from being in the U.S. Army has always been the man next to you, or the soldier, the airman, the Marine, or the sailor that's next to you, willing to give up their lives for you so that you can be able to come home. And there's nothing like it, you know, that commitment, that selfless service, knowing that you will do anything for the next man that's standing next to you. And, you know, drawing back to the continent, I hope that that we can get something like that. I don't know, because I've never served in the army in Sierra Leone, but my hope is that that will be the case.
But obviously you visit your native country and you see how generally the population treats the men and women in uniform.
Right.
Does it really compare?
No, it doesn't. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It's quite different. Soldiers are not feared in the U.S. If I'm in the street, nobody's afraid that I'm going to do anything to them. Whereas, you know, in Sierra Leone, literally a soldier in the street instills some type of fear, and we don't carry our firearms out of the base. It's quite normal to see, you know, soldiers carrying the firearms, you know, outside of the base in Sierra Leone. So.
Now you're retired, but you know, once in the military, it's like you're always in the military. Do you still feel that call of duty as you go about your day-to-day business?
Absolutely. You know, my everyday life is almost always driven by my experiences, you know, in the military, being on time. That's ultimate, having self-discipline, you know, and a host of other things. So I always draw upon that experience. When things are going tough, when everything is going crazy around me, I tend to stay calm, and I think that comes from, you know, my service.
That's what I love. I see men and women in uniform in this country always willing and ready to help.
Absolutely. I mean, even if I'm, you know...
Okay. It looks like we're out of time,
okay,
Sergeant, but I really appreciate you coming to our studios today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Sergeant Bangura is a retired sergeant here in the U.S., and he is a native of Sierra Leone. Now, in other news, welcome back to What's Trending in a moment. Welcome back to What's Trending. In his home in Marrakech, artist Lassane Iwi brings out a cutter and gets to work, slicing up squares of used tires to craft his sculptures. From dragons to unicorns, Iwi creates his artwork out of tires. He collects from landfill sites and scrapyards, and the Moroccan artist believes that there is something noble in recycling tires, injecting art into an object that would otherwise be harmful to the environment. A single sculpture can take Iwi anything from a week to 2 months to make. He sells his art, and previous works have gone on display in exhibitions in France. And in other art news, Gorée Island off the coast of Senegal was host to some of the work showing the Dakar Biennale of African Contemporary Art, an event that celebrates the continent's best modern artists. Installations, photographs, and graffiti art from Cameroon, Senegal, and Ivory Coast dotted the street and houses of Gorée, and a former slave trading center, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Many of this year's displays used recycled materials, which have become hallmarks of the continent's modern art scene. The Biennale organizers believe that this year will mark the beginning of a new era for African artists, thanks to a new exhibition center in Dakar and the opening of a new gallery by the Donwahi Foundation based in Abidjan. And finally, a British student has designed a simple new bicycle light to help cyclists and cash-strapped authorities. Flare is a clip-on handlebar device equipped with 3 buttons, allowing cyclists to report problems they encounter on roads. Each time they click a button, a data point is sent to an accompanying phone app pinpointing the location of the problem. Reports can then be loaded onto a map, telling local councils where they should be focusing investment and repairs. The device can be placed anywhere on bars within reach of the rider's thumbs to allow use within the same range of a bell. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show for today. Good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A lot of American English idioms refer to parts of the body.
Get off on the wrong foot.
Are Anna and Jonathan having trouble learning a dance? How did it go meeting your girlfriend's family?
Well, it was interesting. First, I was really late.
Oh, Jonathan.
Yeah, and then at dinner, I spilled my water all over her mom.